Welcome back to Sonic Insurgency. I'm your host, Patrick McFarlane. In this episode, we're going to be discussing one of the greatest heavy metal bands of all time. You might have heard of them, Slayer. More specifically, we're going to be discussing their lead guitarist, Jeff Hanneman, and his obsession with World War II and the Nazi atrocities. Throughout Slayer's history, Jeff Hanneman's obsession with World War II and the Nazis really kind of landed the band in some hot water. So we're going to be talking about that just a little bit. But before we do that, I just want to remind everyone this is the second episode, so make sure that you follow and subscribe to the show. If you like it, make sure that you share it with your friends and family. I really do appreciate that. It really helps spread the word about the show. Please rate and review the show on iTunes and any other platform that you're listening to it. Really do appreciate that. If I find it, I will read your review on the next episode of the show. Subscribe on YouTube and subscribe on Odyssey for video versions that I do of the show. And I also get away with playing some of the music, and I can't do that in the audio versions because Anchor won't let me. But anyways, if you haven't heard of Odyssey, it's like YouTube. It's a peer-to-peer video sharing platform that runs on cryptocurrency, so it's a lot better. Find all that at libertyweekly.net, which is my website that I'll use for this, /Sonic Insurgency. I'll put all the links there. You can find everything. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at liberty_weekly. Again, this isn't the only podcast that I do. So you can check out that other content as well. If you want to email me, you can email me at sonicinsurgency@protonmail.com. So, all right, into the content here. I was thinking a lot about this. This came up on a Facebook post that I was following. People talking about Slayer and how their imagery was kind of reminiscent of the Nazis. And I knew there was something behind it, so I wanted to explore it a little bit in this podcast. And in fact, this is what got me thinking about doing this podcast in the first place, because it's a really interesting story. So we're going to start out with a little show and tell here. So I only have one vinyl record of Slayer, and that's, I think, Show No Mercy is their first album. But to start us off, you can see some of the imagery that could be construed as being Nazi. I mean, you do have a pentagram, but you have some symbology that is swords, and I think this kind of in-your-face, very aggressive, kind of imperialistic artwork is kind of reminiscent of the Nazis. Now, Jeff Hanneman here in the lower corner, for those of you watching the video version, he's the one who, in my understanding, really drove a lot of the imagery behind it, but he was also very interested in the Roman Empire. So you see that coming about in some of the music that Slayer puts out, but you also see their pentagram sword logo on the back. But these are very early pictures of Slayer. So just to get into Slayer, they're a California band. They were one of the first bands to really combine heavy metal with the speed and aggression of punk. And Jeff Hanneman had a lot of punk influences himself. He really liked the Dead Kennedys and Black Flag. Black Flag, my understanding is, I'm not as well versed on hardcore, but Black Flag was punk, but they were also kind of the roots of what you would call hardcore punk, which is just a bit more aggressive and in your face than traditional punk was. So getting into it here, there's an article that I have from Guitar World magazine from when Jeff Hanneman died, because he did pass away in 2013. And that was pretty sad to me. I remember it specifically the day that I found out that he had passed away, because I've always liked Slayer. I really love Slayer. They're a great band. They're very well known. But they have this quality to them that's just, I would describe it as like frantic and off the rails. And I think it's because they use a lot of chromatic scales, and it just feels kind of all over the place. And Kerry King and Jeff Hanneman are very good at this. But I describe it to people as like a railroad train that's careening down the tracks, and it's like you think it's going to come off the tracks, but at the last second it dips back and it keeps going forwards. But it's always just like full blown. All the steam is in the boiler. You're shoveling coal in, and the whistle's blowing, and it's just like that, like from Back to the Future, the third movie, where they're trying to, go back to the future, of course, and they're trying to get that steam engine up to speed, and it's just it's wild and uncontrolled, and you think that's part of the the joy of listening to Slayers, because you always feel like it's going to come apart, or if I could visualize it, listening to Slayer feels like some maniac is chasing you with a butcher knife and you're doing everything that you can to get away from it. But let's take a little look here at the symbology that we're talking about, because Jeff Hanneman invoked a lot of this, and you can see on the screen for those of you watching the video version, but there's the very famous Slayer logo, which is the German, it looks very much like it is kind of a German Nazi Reich eagle, and you have the Slayer logo with the pentagram of swords on it. And let's see if we can't get a bigger picture of this logo. And so, I mean, it's pretty in your face. It's pretty blatant. And you get that, but you also have another patch that's a little lesser known, which is the Slatanic Wehrmacht. And you can see that on the screen. For those of you who aren't watching, it's a German army helmet with kind of like I don't know, a skull ape kind of face. And this is an original patch. And I actually have one of these patches that I got. And the Wehrmacht, for those of you who don't know, is the German army. Now, the German army in World War II, it was called the Wehrmacht, but there's a very important distinction to be made between the SS soldiers and those who were extremely loyal to Hitler, and the Wehrmacht, because the Wehrmacht was, as I understand it, just the regular soldiers, some who were conscripted in, I believe, and they weren't the dyed-in-the-wool Nazis. They were just regular people who, you know, maybe they were fighting for their friends or their family, but they weren't Kool-Aid drinkers, as you would say. So those are two examples of blatant Nazi imagery being used in Slayer's music. And here's another one here. I'm trying to find the picture of Jeff Hanneman's guitar. You actually see, this is his guitar, his Jackson guitar. Now you see a lot of things on it. You see a peace logo in the top. You also see, you know, a Raiders football like sticker. You also see Black Flag emblem. You see a Dead Kennedys sticker. But you see a Waffen SS sticker as well on his guitar. And, you know, that really upsets a lot of people. Oh, there's also an Anarchy sticker there. Interesting. But more specifically, oh, and it looks like here's another eagle here you can see on his guitar. But there definitely is, you know, a skull and crossbones and a Waffen SS sticker here. And of course, understandably, that really upsets a lot of people, especially people who are Jewish, who maybe lost family or ancestors in the Holocaust. But let's see what that's all about, because this really gets at the heart of what heavy metal and the subject matter in heavy metal is all about. Because especially with bands like Cannibal Corpse, bands that I really do enjoy, people just don't understand exactly what the obsession is with violence, especially ultra violence, and some of the sexual violence that is depicted in bands and songs like Cannibal Corpse and many others. But I assure you, this kind of gets into, there was a situation in the 90s. I can't remember exactly what the lady's name was, but she wanted to ban everything. And it was kind of a conservative movement in the 90s wanting to ban all this music. Tipper Gore, her name was. And it kind of centered Judas Priest. Ironically enough, I didn't discuss this in the last episode, but Judas Priest was one of the bands kind of at the forefront of this, because there were two kids who decided to attempt suicide, and it was blamed on Judas Priest, and Judas Priest was sued by the family, I believe, because the kids listened to Judas Priest, and there was a lyric, specifically one line said, "This world isn't living in," or it's the world's not worth living in. I think it was from Stained Class. It was a song from Stained Class. So you get Tipper Gore in the 90s going after, I believe the 90s going after extreme music. You get the Satanic Panic that was kind of happening in the 80s and the 90s. You also get a big movement against like gangster rap that was happening at the same time. We might touch on gangster rap a little bit in this show, because I do enjoy like the East and West Coast like 90s gangster rap scene. I really like boom bap stuff. I also like 3-6 Mafia a lot, but that's an aside. So we go on this in this Guitar World article talking about Jeff Hanneman from when he died. It talks about Jeff Hanneman's obsession with World War II. It says, on the road, particularly in later years, Jeff spent most of his time on the tour bus after gigs by himself, watching the History Channel or reading a book about World War II. Quote, Jeff was super intelligent about history. World War II became his thing, says Kerry King. Hanneman, whose German-American father fought as an American soldier in World War II and brought home medals from dead Nazi soldiers that he gave to his son, was morbidly fascinated by the Second World War in Nazi Germany, collecting dozens of German soldier action figures and naming his various dogs and cats after Nazi officials and elements of World War II-era Germany. His own wedding ring was a collectible replica of a skull emblazoned band worn by high-ranking Nazi official Reinhard Heydrich. Well, objects connected to this time in history are understandably offensive to many. To Jeff, they were just symbols of the same darkness that energizes metal's imagery. Jeff wrote what he wrote, says Tom Araya, and people would analyze it and come up with their own conclusions. But to Jeff, it was just a song about this or that. There was no deep meaning behind anything, and a lot of the stuff he did, he knew that it would cause a reaction. He knew it would get a response, and if you're going to make a big stink about it, that's your problem. That was his attitude about it. So that's kind of the attitude you can see by Kerry King and on Tom Araya. Just that I really do understand this. You know, I do understand this obsession with darkness, with dark things in the world. And in a lot of cases, I don't think it's glorifying what happened as much as it is being fascinated by it and kind of wanting to understand it, possibly in an attempt not to make it happen again, but possibly just really trying to figure out how it ticks, what happened, and the trappings of it, because you know, it's kind of the same way that people get they want to see what happened. If you see a really messed up car accident, your eyes are glued to it. And I think it's because in our society, something about modern society, but we really don't have the same relationship with death that we used to have, because things have become so sterile. Living, you know, the living life expectancies are so high. We have modern conveniences. We just, you know, most children live in some ways sometimes they get diseases, but that's the miracles of modern medicine have been able to do that. Especially Americans were so removed from things like war because war has not touched America except for a couple of times. And no one here now living remembers anything like that. And so we have this obsession with things that we don't see very often, like war and death. And in a way, it's kind of taboo. It's all these things are taboo, and there's a bunch of things that you're not allowed to talk about. And I think that in a certain sense, that causes people to become more obsessed with them, because everyone who has kids understands that when you tell a kid not to do something, they just want to do it more, because that's the way the brain works. It's like, screw you, I'm not going to listen to you. What's in that box? If someone's telling me not to look in that box, that just makes me want to look into it, because it's got to be interesting, right? So that, to me, it sounds like that's what he would do. Jeff Hanneman would do. So we have this other article in Rolling Stone talking about, it's entitled "How Slayer's Controversial Angel of Death Changed Thrash Band Forever." The group chronicled Nazi horrors on infamous Rain and Blood opener, igniting an industry firestorm. So we get through. Rain and Blood was also mired in controversy even before it hit the streets, thanks to the presence of its brutal opening track, Angel of Death. Penned by Slayer guitarist Jeff Hanneman, the song about the medical experiments conducted by infamous Nazi physician Josef Mengele on prisoners at the Auschwitz concentration camp, caused Columbia Records to nix the record's scheduled April 1986 release. Columbia, the distributor for Rubin's Def Jam imprint, was already put off by the album's lurid cover art. Hieronymus Bosch, like Tableau, that features demons sporting erections and Pope mitres, but the lyrics of Angel of Death, which opened with the lines, Auschwitz, the meaning of pain, the way that I want you to die, were the final straw. My shareholders are all Jewish, exclaimed the label president, Walter Yednikov. One thing you learn about me if you listen to this show is that I'm terrible at pronouncing things. So, anyways, this man envisioned a massive outcry over the song and insisted that it be removed from the record. All of a sudden, the record company doesn't want to release the album because of this song, Slayer bassist and vocalist Tom Araya recalled in a 2012 interview with Team Rock. When Jeff brought in the song, we thought, wow, that's really cool. Mengele was the guy that did all those crazy, awful things. Then all of a sudden, we discovered that people had a problem with that. We were like, fuck. When Rubin refused to remove the song. So, anyways, I think it's really interesting. I'm a pro free speech absolutist kind of guy. We need to discuss these things and have these conversations and not be afraid of hurting people's feelings about it. That doesn't mean you should be a dick about it, but it just means that, everything should be on the table. And if only because people who have these crazy ideas like flat earthers, that's just an example. But people who have these crazy ideas, they can be brought out in the light. Neo-Nazis, if they're free to discuss their ideas, then their ideas aren't stewing and festering in the darkness somewhere and becoming more and more radical. You bring them out, you can engage them on that, you can confront their ideas and explain to them why it's bullshit. Or you can also, they can just be laughed out of society in a certain way. Not forcibly removed from society, but kind of in a way shunned, because everyone will know once you discuss that information that it's just crazy, and they won't want to look in the black box. If you say, "Oh, neo-Nazism is something we put in the black box, and no one can ever think about it, talk about it. We're just not going to do it," then people will want to know. Some people will want to know what's in that black box. So going further here, we have the actual lyrics of Angel of Death, where he talks about Yosef Mengele. And let's look at the Holocaust Encyclopedia at the Holocaust Museum, talking about Mengele, what he was born in 1911. Before Auschwitz, he joined the Nazi Party in 1937, received his degree soon after in 1938, and that was the same year he joined the SS, according to this website. There is little documentation about Mengele's activities between 1938 and 1943, but it's clear that he first functioned as a medical expert for the Race and Settlement Main Office in the summer of 1940 at the Central Immigration Office, Northeast in Posen. Then he served as a medical officer in the SS Division Viking, SS Pioneer Battalion 5, when he first saw action on the Eastern Front. So, it kind of goes through. He was wounded, returned to Germany in 1943. He was working at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Genetics, and Eugenics, which we'll talk about in just a minute. He was not the only physician at Auschwitz. He's believed to be the highest ranking physician at the camp, but that was not true. However, he was known for his medical experiments. He became very interested in using twins for medical research through his mentor, Versucher. Versucher himself was famous for experimenting with identical and fraternal twins in order to trace the genetic origins of various diseases. During the 30s, twin research, so it kind of goes on and on. So some of the things that he did are documented in Angel of Death with those lyrics. So we're going to look at those just a little bit. Auschwitz, the meaning of pain, the way that I want you to die, slow death, immense decay, showers that cleanse you of your life, forced in like cattle, you run, stripped of your life's worth, human mice for the angel of death, 400,000 more to die. Angel of death, monarch to the kingdom of the dead, sadistic surgeon of demise, sadist of the noblest blood, destroying without mercy to benefit the Aryan race. Surgery with no anesthesia, feel the knife pierce you intensely, inferior, no use to mankind, strapped down, screaming out to die. Infamous butcher, angel of death. Pump with fluid inside your brain, pressure in your skull begins pushing through your eyes, burning flesh drips away. Test of heat burns your skin, your mind starts to boil. Frigid cold cracks your limbs. How long can you last in this frozen water burial? Sewn together, joining heads. just a matter of time till you rip yourselves apart. Millions laid out in their crowded tombs, sickening ways to achieve the Holocaust. So I won't, there's just another verse here. Seas of blood, bury life, smell your death as it burns deep inside of you, abdicate, eyes that bleed, abascinate. I don't know that word, sorry. Eyes that bleed, abstinate. Praying for the end of your wide-awake nightmare, wings of pain reach out for you, his face of death staring down, your blood's running cold, injecting cells, dying eyes, feeding on the screams of the mutants he's creating, pathetic, harmless victims left to die, rancid angel of death flying free. So pretty dark stuff, but you can see that, it if anything, it seems to admonish these experiments, which is really speaking about the how terrible and awful that they were. There's nothing really that's celebrating it here. It's a documentation, and much in the way, I have the same opinion of gangster rap, frankly, that some people, of course, are glorifying violence in gangster rap, but I think primarily it's just a documentation of what they see around them every day, and that's what NWA would say. So the next song is one of my favorites, my favorite off the album, Piece by Piece. Modulistic terror, a vast sadistic feast. The only way to exit is going piece by piece. You have no life or death. My face you will not see. I'll rip your flesh till there's no breath. Dismembered destiny. So you can see this isn't lowbrow stuff here. I mean, they're using words. That last word I couldn't even pronounce, and I'm actually a lawyer, so I guess that doesn't mean anything. I could be an idiot still, but this isn't lowbrow, really stupid stuff. This is well thought out, kind of a narrative here. So to go on, here's another song off the album, Necrophobic, and really what they're talking about here are the darkest of the human condition, but when that human condition is given the power of government, and when it goes wrong, and when the governments take that power and they use it to torture citizens, torture people, to kill people, commit mass murder. This really is an album about authoritarianism and authoritarian governments. And you can see that just kind of in Raining Blood. It's talking about it's talking about despots, despot leaders, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You can see that through the album art right here. If you look more carefully, it looks like, to me, maybe Che Guevara or Castro or somebody here. And of course you can see demons and stuff, but you also see, this guy in the corner right above Rain and Blood looks to me to be some kind of a tyrant or something. You see like a demon Baphomet goat creature in a chair, kind of pointing with a severed head on a pike. Pretty brutal stuff. It's pretty intense. And, of course, all these dead bodies and decapitated heads. So it's about tyranny, essentially, and that's part of the reason why I think that this is so interesting. And so just a little bit more to cover here. We touched on a lot of things. One thing I wanted to cover is how Slayer sings about the eugenics movement, and I wanted to just put in here how the eugenics movement really started in the United States. And I have this paper here that I'll try and put in the show notes page. But it says here, what is often not appreciated is that Nazi efforts were bolstered by the published works of the American eugenics movement as the intellectual underpinnings for its social policies. One of Hitler's first acts after gaining control of the German government was the passage of the law for the prevention of hereditarily diseased offspring. In July 1933. The Nazis, when proposing their own sterilization program, specifically noted the, quote, success of sterilization laws in California, documented most notably by the American eugenicist P.B. Popenoe. The Nazi program ultimately resulted in the sterilization of 360,000 to 375,000 persons. The intellectual linkage between the United States and Nazi eugenic programs is further illustrated by Davenport's presence on the editorial boards of two influential German racial hygiene journals, Zeitschrift für Rassenkunde und ihre Nachbarbeite and Zeitschrift für menschliche Verbunds- und Konstitutionslehre. Sadly, with the benefit of 70 years hindsight, we can see the alignment of the stated goals of the Eugenics Records Office with Nazi social engineering programs as revealed by Davenport. To investigate the nature of those forces or agencies which improve or impair racial or family stock qualities, these forces which act upon immigration, mate selection, and fertility, differential by race and family stock quality, are those which have been given most attention. In the field of immigration, studies have been made in Europe and America on the selection of immigrants have played as recruits to the breeding stock of the American people. Many of these researches were conducted in collaboration with the Committee on Immigration and Naturalization of the House of Representatives and the Immigration Service of the U.S. government. So that's a direct quote there from the the Eugenics Records Office and the Nazi social engineering programs as revealed by Davenport. So that last little connection there. So I've gone a little bit longer on my time. I said I try to keep episodes between 15 and 20 minutes here, but I think that I hope this was a very interesting thing for you guys to ponder here, which is the effect that of this controversy of Jeff Hanneman using this Nazi imagery in his music, but more so only to explore kind of the darkest things from history. And I almost forgot here. This is a hat that I got from my uncle, who was he was in the U.S. Air Force and stationed in Germany. I'm not sure if this is authentic. It could be. I think he got it in the 80s, so it could very well be. For those of you only watching, I'm holding a German Wehrmacht officer's cap. It has the Reich Eagle on the top of it, and it's one that you would maybe see in a movie. It's obviously, like we talked about earlier, it's not SS, but you can see the inside. It looks authentic to me, and it feels like it's old. And so this is one of my prized possessions. It's kind of a family heirloom. My neighbor told me the other day that he has a German Luger that he got from his dad, who served in World War II, and it has all matching serial numbers on it. So, but you can see here, I mean, that is the German Reich Eagle on the top. So, very interesting. But I also have, my step-grandfather was a tank commander that served under George Patton and actually fought through some of the final battles in Europe, and was one of the first people inside the Eagle's Nest, I believe in Austria. But from him, I have this bazooka rocket, which is really cool. It's a practice bazooka rocket, and I looked these up, but these were used in training. And actually, I won't screw it up. The top screws off, and there's no warhead on it or anything. But these were actually fired in the bazookas. As a test for weapons functionality, but you can see that this comes off. There's nothing inside it. So, but yeah, just neat little things here. So just as we're closing up here, I'd like to remind everyone to share this show, subscribe, rate, review. Like I said, I will share any reviews I'll read them aloud on the podcast. Follow on YouTube. You can find all the links. I'll put up a page at libertyweekly.net / Sonic Insurgency. See, this is such a new show. I'm so used to saying my original show name. So, really do appreciate that. You can, we'll catch you next time. Peace.